Hello and welcome to A Celtic State of Mind on a Friday. My name's Laura Bradburn. I'm joined as always by Jim Orr and Tony Haggerty. Jim, how are you?
Super, Laura, how are you?
Not too bad. It's been a quiet week, Tony, hasn't it? Not much going on in the world of football.
So slightly, yes. How are you? Yeah, we'll discuss what's not been going on in football.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I don't know what's... the last couple of years have just blown my mind. I feel like the apocalypse is coming. But anyway, we'll get into it. We were going to start with reviewing the Scottish Cup exit and what that means for the rest of our season and the result against Aberdeen. But obviously, circumstances and discussions have overtaken that. So, Jim, I'll come to you first. Obviously, what seems like a lifetime ago now, the European Super League was announced. 12 teams, announced their intention to make this exclusive European league. There was a bit of discussion about whether it would be just midweek in place of like the Champions League, or whether it would be something that they would permanently play in, as opposed to their domestic leagues. Anyway, a week later, and after much debate and protest and everything, it kind of fell on its backside. So I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts, first of all, about the European Super League and about this new emergence of the British Super League that Celtic are being involved in?
Well, speaking as a legacy fan, that's my new title apparently. We are all legacy fans. I think there was the banner, football was created by the poor, stolen by the rich. That was the banner that was up there. I've got a healthy disregard for anyone in power, be it football or government. And these guys are buffoons, total and utter buffoons. And UEFA have been quite soft. I mean, UEFA should have banned them from next season's competitions. Yeah. Don't let people bully you. You can't let people do that. And for younger people maybe tuning in, I mean, if you go back to the 60s, the 70s and 80s, the European Cup was a cup for the champions of the league. It was a knockout tournament. It wasn't seeded. That's what happened in Lisbon. So the modern equivalent of that would be like Bayern Munich playing Real Madrid in the first round back in September, two-legged, and if Real Madrid get knocked out, that's them stuff for the season. So you'd only get 2 games, and that happened loads of times back in the day. I remember, and Tony remember this, 1979, Notts Forest won the European Cup, Liverpool won the league, and they were drawn against each other in the first round of the 79-80 Cup, and Forest knocked him out. So that's what things were like back then. I think the Champions League came in early 90s, 91, 92, something like that. A league format instead of a cup format. I don't think there was seeding. I can't remember that far back. So that was a bit better. I thought it gave more games. Not what I wanted. You go a few years forward and the thing just loses the plot. And anyone can join the Champions League. Top 4 teams, top 3 teams. And it just becomes just completely stupid there. What I've always wanted for decades now, and because I'm so old I can say decades, what I've wanted for decades now is an actual European midweek league that would run alongside the domestic leagues. So you'd have a kind of, so you'd rid of the Champions League, rid of the Europa League, you'd have a first division, second division, third division, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. 10 teams in each league. Put them in there by the coefficient. That's a kind of fair way to do that. Have relegation as well. So have all the leagues. And actually, you would actually get the Super League by that, because that first division of 10 teams, they would mainly be your PSGs and Real Madrid and Bayern Munich and all that kind of stuff. And I looked at the coefficient this morning, and we're something like 46th. So that would equate to something like the 5th division if something like that happened. A guaranteed 18 games. And the teams who are in and around us are teams like Young Boys, Schalke, Borussia Mönchengladbach. And I would love that. I'd love 18 games throughout the course of the season in that kind of competition, trying to get the top places to get up to Division 4, etc. And the team across the city, they'd be in the league below that. They'd be with teams like Leicester, AC Milan. They'd like that as well. If I go further down, Aberdeen would be in Division 16 with teams like Slovan Bratislava. So that's the way I'd like to go. And so that when you win the league or you win the cup, it's nothing to do with Europe. It's just the achievement. It's the glory of winning the league. Because what the winning the league now has become, it's a means to an end. You win the league and you could potentially get £30 million. And what I would like to see, I've always liked to see, is the Scottish team becoming better. And because there's two teams in the country that are so far ahead of them, if one or both of them qualifies for the Champions League and they pocket 30, 40 million, that just pushes them further and further away. So I'd much rather a kind of genuine midweek European league. I don't fancy any kind of UK league, but a European league like that based on merit, that's what I'd go for.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think what that brings to mind is, I think what got on my nerves about this Super League being announced was the idea of meritocracy being thrown out the window. The idea that even if there were 4 or 5 teams that could come in and out of it every season, that there would be certain teams, no matter how well or how poorly they played, they would be guaranteed a place, even if, in the case of Arsenal, Tottenham, Manchester United, they've been far from the best teams in their leagues for a number of years now. Tony, what do you make of Jim's idea, and what are your thoughts on what's transpired over the last week?
Love Jim's idea. I think it's brilliant. Really do. I wouldn't have any problem with that. I wrote 2 words down about this European Super League: greed, grotesque. Right. Right, Jim's old enough to remember this as well. See, from 1980 to 1982, Celtic played the best in Europe. Played Real Madrid, played Juventus and Ajax on the spin. Right, brilliant. Great competition, European Cup, 2-legged affair. They took the chance. Lost to Real Madrid, Juventus, put out Ajax. Right, but as Jim says, 92, 93, sabotaged by greedy corporate Gordon Geckos. If you've seen the film Wall Street, greed is good. They latched onto that. And they sacrificed the greatest club competition on earth, because that's what it was, at the altar of cash. They couldn't bear to see the likes of Real Madrid, Bayern, Barcelona, Inter, AC Milan, Liverpool, Man U going out in the first round. So they contrived this abomination, and that's what it is. It's an abomination, and it was totally removed from the original spirit of what the European competition was meant to be about. And the new rules ensured Celtic, Nottingham Forest, Steaua Bucharest, Red Star, Aston Villa, Bayern, PSV, never win it again. Cinderella stories up the spout. They don't want you. They don't care for you. It was a death knell for European competition and a death knell for sporting integrity, and that as we know it. And you know the irony of the dirty dozen? A third of them haven't even won a Champions League or a European Cup.
Yeah.
Manchester, Arsenal, Tottenham, none of them have won it. Celtic have contributed more to the history of that competition than any of those guys. But filthy lucre, and the emphasis on filthy, by the way. But what have you ever done? Jim said you've done nothing. You ever helped this? Ever helped these people steal the game? Stole the working class heart and soul out of football, and they've been aiding them and abetting them for 30 years. Don't tell me that, the suits don't give a toss. They didn't give a toss then, they don't give a toss now. They're flicking the metaphorical V sign at you by saying, we've got the door, what are you going to do about it? Never cared about football.
They've done a Jim Melrose, if you will.
Yes, a Jim Melrose indeed. They have. They don't care about football. Never have, never will. That's why I get annoyed with Alexander Serafin saying, oh, there's a place for Celtic, Rangers and Ajax. They didn't care about any of these clubs.
Yeah.
So if Celtic were so important, why have they made them play 4 qualifiers? A past winner enrich the history of your tournament. Make them play 4 qualifiers. Go to any kind of quagmire or swamp to try and qualify. Just that, and yet for kidding himself on that they're the paragons of virtue now. They're the saviours of European football. They're the one that helped rig it and bend it out of complete and utter shape and proportion. You know what I mean? Celtic supporters sing just can't get enough. The other Depeche Mode song that springs to mind is the grabbing hands grab all they can because everything counts in large amounts. That's what they did. Sold complete and utterly. And these 12, I would relegate them, by the way, the 12 clubs. I would relegate them to the division below just to say to them, you think you can do what you like? Have a bit of that. I really would, because as Jim said, see the 4 clubs from Germany, England, Spain and Italy getting into the Champions League, it's a total nonsense. Look at the carve-up. Look at the Champions League semi-final. Man City, PSG, Real Madrid, Chelsea. You may as well put that as Cash Rich Club 1 versus Cash Rich Club 2, Cash Rich Club 3 versus Cash Rich Club 4. The winners of the Champions League are going to be Cash Rich Club X. Nonsense. And it makes you want to. It makes you sick. It makes me want to Wallace and Gromit. It really does. I
think also, Laura, you have to move with the times. So I don't actually mind a new type of tournament, but as long as it's based on meritocracy and it's not seeded in any way, shape or form. And that's why I think a league that I described earlier is actually quite a fair way forward. And I think lots of teams will get lots out of that. I mean, it'd be good to see teams like Hibs be involved in European competition, playing 18 games against Hibs, teams at Hibs level, Hearts, Motherwell. That'll make them stronger. It may not be as big a pot or a bigger pie to split up with people, but to me that's fairer. And I wouldn't have any issues with that, as I say, that first division being Barcelona, Real Madrid, etc., because they are there in merit, because they have been the best teams. But what might that happen then? Teams like Arsenal or Chelsea might get relegated.
Yeah.
You could have the bottom 2 going down, the bottom 3 going down, and you could have playoffs. You could do a whole lot of stuff, I think, with this. And
I think
that was fairer.
I think that was another thing that kind of came to mind, and picking up on what Tony said is, UEFA and Sky Sports ironically placed themselves as kind of moral arbiters for football and the greater good this week, when in actual fact, their system is no better. It made me think of a line from one of my favourite movie characters, the Joker. Heath Ledger played. He says, "Nobody panics when things go according to the plan, even if the plan is horrifying." So basically, UEFA were happy for everybody to stick with what they've got, even if it's not particularly better than this new idea, just because everybody already knows it. It's, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. But to take it a bit more towards Celtic, Jim, I'll come to you first. Obviously, off the back of all this European Super League stuff, there's been this suggestion that we might go into a UK or British kind of Super League, if you want to put it that way. I have my own thoughts on it, but I noted that you said that you weren't really up for it when you were summarising your first answer. Why is that you wouldn't really be up for Celtic going into a UK league like that?
I don't think we should jump into anywhere. I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair to teams like Notts Forest, Preston North End, Bristol City, blah, 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 blah. You name it. It's unfair to jump into something like that. I want if we're going to go into something that we'd have to go at the bottom and work our way up. If that happened to us, we would go mad. If somebody went into our league, you shouldn't be there. So I don't think we should jump into anywhere. And that's why what I described earlier, I think that's a fair way forward. And eventually you will be in a league with another 9 teams, and 2 or 3 of them might be teams from England. I mean, it means, I'm not interested in it at all. Yeah. Not for me.
I think, Tony, just to... Paul was on just before we came on air with David Lowe, talking about it, and as much as I get Jim's point about it not being fair jumping in, my more issue with it was, while I really appreciate listening to what David says, and he's a great guest to have on. He's been so influential and at the centre of a lot of Celtic's biggest sort of moments off the pitch in the last 30 years. He said, he mentioned about Scotland being a backwater and being, small time, and that we would want to try our hand and progress in another league. I'm personally not for that, not because I don't think it would benefit us financially, not because I don't think that we could push forward in Europe, but just, to me, that isn't Celtic. Nope. Celtic is going to Wraith Rovers and potentially losing a cup tie that you thought you were going to win. Celtic is going to Aberdeen and remembering the times when we were both bigger on the European stage than we are now, and revelling in that, and still having a rivalry there that we can put at the front of our minds when we go and play each other. What are your thoughts on the British League? I don't personally have any interest in playing a Brighton or a Hull or whatever. It means nothing to me.
Can't shout the odds about this European Super League and then quit Scottish football or aim to quit Scottish football, turning your back on it for the same kind of thing, cash. Which you kind of get in your high horse about the ESL and then go and join a close shop yourself, right? Total hypocrisy, right? Scottish football's many things, Laura, but I tell you what it is. It's competitive and it's honest and it's pure and it's raw and it's not really been tainted by massive investment, which is why it's still quite healthy and we all enjoy it, and for all the reasons that you've just outlined. I also think that Celtic Rangers have got an obligation to the game in this country. You know, they're Scottish football teams. And if they were to leave, then it would only be, and I'm not saying this will happen, but I would have to say that the caveat would be that Celtic Rangers would still have to have a presence in the Scottish League. I'd say with an under-23 team, you know, because Celtic Rangers are the ones that can afford an under-23 team, and that way you would keep that presence. You know, but I think Scottish football could reinvent itself then as well, because Motherwell fans, Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs fans, they would like a crack at winning the title.
Yeah.
They're not playing for third place every year. You know, I'm not saying this will happen, but it's just an idea, you know, that if Celtic Rangers see this future down south, but like Jim says, why would teams like Sunderland and Hull and all that roll over? Accept them? You know, I just don't see them not pursuing some legal avenue if Celtic Rangers were just allowed in.
Yeah.
But if they did and they left, then Celtic Rangers would still have to have a presence in Scotland, and I would make sure that they had an under-23 team in the league, so because people would still want to go and watch a Celtic Rangers under-23 team, because you couldn't go to London, Liverpool, Manchester, whatever every other week. You know, so you'd still get a crowd of such. And if Sky or whoever pulled the money out, then I would say to BBC Scotland and STV, why don't you invest in it? This is your national game.
Yeah, you know? I think as well, like, Jim, I'll come to you on this one, potentially to shield me from some of what's about to come my way when I say this, but we've sat and watched our club say hashtag one club since 1888, we aren't half of anything, blah, blah, blah. Surely it would be the height of hypocrisy for the club to then pair up with Rangers in some form and go and try our hand at another league as part of what undoubtedly would be a pair going down there, because I don't think you would get one without the other.
That wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, they can't go there. They've made their beds now. One club since 1888. That's it. Right. Stick to that then. Don't twist. Right. Don't do that. As I said, I've got no interest in going down south at all. Also, there's a wee bit of me that's kind of be careful what you wish for with some of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because what's then going to happen if we do go bigger and we become this huge club? Then we're going to have to pay transfer fees that are ridiculous. We're going to have to pay players' wages that are ridiculous. And I think a lot of fans are completely disconnected with the club. Mm-hmm. And I think football has went mad over the past maybe 2-3 decades. And I was on the podcast a few months ago when we were talking about the goalkeeping situation. And at the time we were linked with a Manchester United second choice goalkeeper. I can't remember the guy's name, possibly Tony can remember the guy's name. And he was on 120 grand a week, the second choice goalkeeper, because De Gea was on nearly £400,000 a week.
Yeah.
I couldn't go and watch my football team if they played one of my players 400 grand a week, no 300 grand a week, no 200 grand a week. And I've said in the past how much I would be willing to pay a player per week. Maybe that's a question for the chat room. How much would you feel comfortable paying a player? And I know all about supply and demand and there's loads of money sloshing about football. But I couldn't go and watch a football team, my team, if we're paying somebody 400 grand a week. Couldn't do it.
Tony, I think Jim raises a good point there. You know, I've had this conversation with my mum, who, as I've said many times on this podcast, is one of, if not the main reason that I'm a Celtic supporter today. She talks about, you know, back when she was watching the Quality Street Gang was her team growing up. That was her era. And that, you know, you would see the players at the training ground, you would see them out in the town when you were out at the weekend, you would bump into them and almost be able to talk to them on a normal human level. We're already so disconnected from the players as they are right now. Albion Ayeti, who's done next to nothing for us this season, is posting pictures of his Mercedes on Instagram. Wouldn't this move, as Jim says, just distance us from them even more if we aren't already?
I'm dead set against it for the same reason that Jim were like. Football is killed. Money is killed. Football, the way you and I know it. You know, these guys at UEFA and the Suits and all the big clubs, they've stolen our game. and it will one day crash in on them because it has to. You know, they've committed an act of grand larceny. It's going to come back and bite them someday. You know, and they're the ones that have driven football to the edge of the financial abyss, right? With these TV deals and money that you and I just makes the mind boggle. You know, so I can't wait for the fallout from the fall into the abyss because it'll be watering on everyone, honestly. And they deserve everything that's coming to them. That's why I don't want Celtic to be a part of it. We are who we are. We are what we are. And I like you. I'm a traditionalist. I like being in the Scottish League. I like trying to get to the Champions League every year. I like trying to see my team qualify for the group stages and get access to cash. But I don't like the fact that we'll never ever win the Champions League again because they've slanted it so much that, 1967 will never be repeated.
Plus, I think
also,
this
Laura,
is the very
Laura, just to follow. Oh, sorry, Laura. How you go?
No, I was just going to say this is the very season we could label ourselves hypocrites that we can't even win the league that we're in. Never mind try and find another league that will take us. Sorry, Jim. I'll pass back to you.
Sorry to butt in. No, I was just going to say that the other things to follow on from the point I just made there. How much does it cost to go and watch football down south? How much is a season tickets just now? £1,000, £2,000?
Yeah.
How much for a match ticket? £60, £70, £80? That's just, you're just going to try and cater for a different type of fan. And us legacy fans will be left behind. So I think you have to be careful what you wish for. And that's my point, that rather than lots of money going into players' pockets, I think we should be looking to cut the price of season tickets.
Yeah.
And match tickets, 20's plenty and all that stuff.
This was another point that I wanted to raise, just to, people know my thoughts on season tickets already and what makes a Celtic fan and what doesn't make a Celtic fan. I don't think you need a season ticket to be one. We're already in a situation where it's, £600 for a season ticket? There's plenty of people already can't afford that. And like Jim says, it's just going to go through the roof if we end up in a league that's more watched or whatever. And you're just going to create a bigger divide there. I think we need to remember that the support of a club is about more than just the 50 or 60,000 people that buy a season ticket every season. They are, without doubt, part of the major backbone of the club, but they are no more or less important than those of us who watch every week and carry on the legacy of the club through our families, through our friends, through going to the pub to watch it. I am on the waiting list for a season ticket and I'm seriously considering whether I want to do it because I really enjoy going to the pub with my uncle to watch the games. We had some of the best memories that we've had in the last couple of seasons, going to the Europa League matches on a Thursday night to sit with in my case, a can of Iron Brew, in his case, a pint of Tennent's, and watch that. And I enjoy that as much as sometimes being at the games as well. So my basic point is, you're a fan if you say you're a fan. What do you make of that, Tony?
I spoke about there. What do we want? Do we want legacy fans, as Jim calls them, die-hard fans, or do we want, as what Roy Keane once referred to as, the prawn sandwich brigade?
Yeah.
You be careful what you wish for. You want to price. You're pricing ordinary, hard-working fans out of football anyway. So if you attach yourself to the British Super League wagon, then who's going to be able to afford that? Only a select percentage of Celtic fans will be able to afford that. And again, we go back to it. Surely that goes against the very ethos and foundation of why the club was started. You cannot have a club, catering for the likes of your high-end supporters solely. I mean, you would drag the heart and soul out of Celtic if you did that. And I am totally and utterly against joining any kind of British league. Totally and utterly against it.
Well, I think we've made our points clear, as a lot of people are on the chat. Obviously, a lot of you joining us from Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Thanks very much for getting involved today. Lots of streams on A State of Mind, not just football, but we've got a Celtic State of Mind where we are now branching out to cover the women's game, as we've done this week and are doing this weekend. We are putting loads of new content out there, even more stuff to come that you haven't seen yet. So please get subscribed and turn your notifications on so that you know when we go live or when a new show goes up. want to move on to a slightly different topic, talking about social media and talking about the engagement that we get from people. And Jim, we're very fortunate in a lot of ways that we have this platform to come on and air our views and say what we believe to be true about Celtic and what our opinions are. Tony and I were involved in a little bit of I believe the person now was perhaps winding people up by what they did, because I saw them do it to a few people after me, but we were involved in a situation where somebody tried to attribute something that was said on one of the podcasts first to me and then to Tony before it eventually found its true source. Not something I would ever have said, I have to say. Greg Taylor is captain. I would never say that, but it got me thinking about how much we appreciate the views of the viewers and getting engaged with us, but how I think it's a difficult line to balance when you're trying to sort of establish what somebody's opinions are and getting them mixed up with other people's. Have you experienced a bit of that? People maybe attributing things to you that weren't said by you?
I think this is an interesting question. I mean, up until podcast time, you maybe 4 or 5 year mates get to hear what your views of life are. Now there's some Fridays there's maybe 10, 20, 30,000 people listening to me talking rubbish, so that's a bit different. What I found in the early days of the podcast, what was quite annoying, I suppose, is that at the end of the day, it's just opinions. And you don't expect everyone to agree with your opinion, and that's fine. But when people come in the chat room and start saying things like, this guy's a clown, doesn't know what he's talking about, that's rubbish, that annoys me, because I don't mind people having different opinions to yourself. But if they come on and say, I disagree with this guy because X, Y, and Z, I don't have an issue with that, because I don't expect people to agree with me. And it's usually maybe look at the YouTube comments maybe later on in the afternoon, and if people say something that I think I didn't say that, then I will take the time to answer them back. If somebody says something nice about us, I'll say thanks for that. So social media is a fantastic thing, and it's also a terrible thing. And I tend not to get too wound up about it. It's a bit of fun at the end of the day. You're expressing an opinion on a few things. There's obviously a few lunatics that are on social media, so you don't want to engage with them anyway. You would tend to just ignore them, because if you engage with idiots, then you end up bringing yourself down to their level. So that's
as I have done many a time.
Don't go there, Laura. Don't go there.
Your problem in the rub, Laura, because you do engage with them, and you just take a step back and calm down. As Jim says, everybody has an opinion, whether it's right or wrong. Most of us speak on here and we give a rationale for why we hold an opinion. And I think the guy who I ended up speaking to as well, I gave him a rationale for what I said, And first and foremost, I would say to somebody who's going to come on and say anything to anybody that appears in the pod, firstly watch the pod and listen to it.
Absolutely.
Right, first and foremost, and then you can come on and say, you said that, that's fine. And as Tim says, it's only your opinion. We're not saying that it's right or it's wrong. It's just an opinion that we hold. And as I said to the guy the other night, I see football through my prism. It's my lens and nobody else's. So nobody can say to me that it's wrong. And I can't say to you, but it's right as well. It's just the way I see things. And as Jim says, as long as it doesn't get abusive, it's fine. Healthy debate is good, right? You can argue about things. You can be at polar ends of a spectrum and never the twain shall meet. That's fine. But when it becomes personal and then it becomes silly, then that's when social media becomes, not a very good tool. It's a brilliant tool. You can connect with people, and then you can reason out and talk to guys and reach out. And I love that. And I'm like Jim, someone says something nice, I get in touch with them, because it's the right thing to do. If somebody says something nasty, you might kind of gauge it and say, is this person approachable? And I've approached a couple of people who've been nasty, and within a couple of messages, it's like, oh, you're all right? You're like, well, great, thanks very much. We agree to differ, but there are others that are just no listening. because I'm not prepared.
That was me did that, Tony, wasn't it?
Well, David Kelly's just saying there, any of the panel that put their head above the chopping block every time they open their mouth. Some talk absolute conspiracy nonsense, but it's still a good show. I don't know who you could possibly mean, David. I don't know who you could possibly mean. But no, the reason that I wanted to talk about it was because, as we all know, I made the mistake, having watched Moya Elyounoussi score 2 goals against Livingston and everybody lose their minds and suggest that we should buy him straight away, sort of said, I didn't particularly agree with that. If you were going to ask me which loan player I would have out of the ones that we have, if I had to pick one, I would say Laxalt. He then did me an absolute dirty by putting in one of the worst performances I've ever seen by a player in a Celtic shirt, and people with the benefit of hindsight came after me suggesting that I'm just a terrible judge of football player. And I think that's what the problem is, Tony. The problem is we say these things and then most of the time never look back at them again.
Yeah.
A lot of these people watching are maybe watching after the fact and then picking me up for something that I've since changed my mind on, and you're in a situation where these things come back to bite you.
I'd also say to you as well, tranquilo, is what I mean. It's not that serious, right? I mean, it isn't. You just got to breathe on it a bit, Laura. You know, and I know it might be an addictive thing in your personality, that's fine, and you just kind of teach it. I mean, it's what you're doing just now. It's a form of entertainment.
I love it.
So you're entertaining people. Some people.
I wouldn't go that far, Tony.
I did say a form of.
I think also.
I was saying that's entertainment.
I think also.
So you
I think also.
Reading on it, just on you go.
I think also by its very nature, an opinion is subjective.
Yeah.
So there's no right or wrong answer, true or false, black or white. It's subjective. Yeah. If you're talking about objective things, there's a right and wrong. If I say today's Thursday, you can say that's wrong. I admit, oh yeah, right. I can't argue with that. If you think Laxalt's a good player, that's your opinion. You're wrong, obviously.
I couldn't continue to argue it after that Rangers game, I have to say.
And you'll find well if you hang your hat on an opinion. Commentators curse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So you just, I do think that social media's, it can be a cesspit, but it can also be a great place for witticisms and comedy and fun. If you treat it all like that, that I don't think anybody goes out deliberately to hurt somebody or intentionally wound, but there are people that just can't help themselves, and it becomes abusive, and you just steer clear of that. As Jim said, it's like the pub boar. You want to go near them in the pub, so don't go near them online or in chat rooms or social media. It's that simple, and you use your judgment on that, but.
Well, Kevin Byrne coming in the comments saying Laxalt is good on Pro Evolution Soccer 21, and that is the most important thing, obviously. So if he's good on that, he must be good in real life. But thanks everybody for your comments. No, thanks everybody for your comments. We have these interactions on Twitter and we do enjoy them. Sometimes they take a bit of a different slant and things like that, but we love getting involved with your comments and seeing everybody watching and I even see people, saying hello to each other that, appear to have got to know each other through these comments and through these live chats, and it's great to see. So we'll move on anyway. As King Jim often says, we move on. And what we will do is move on. Jim, Tony and I were in the match coverage of the Celtic Rangers game, part of what was dubbed the Magnificent Seven, which I quite enjoyed, I have to say. I don't know how magnificent some of the seven were, but we'll leave it there. What were your thoughts looking at the way we went out of the Scottish Cup? How did you think we performed, and was it much of a surprise to you?
This is actually quite a seamless link into people think other people are talking rubbish. Because I think you were all really harsh. I thought at full time you were all pretty. I mean, there was thousands of yous as well. I thought you were harsh because understandable. That's why I don't go on the podcast in a match day. too much emotion. It's too raw. Totally understandable. Lost the game. We're out the cup. Another death by 1,000 cuts. What's that?
Yes.
35 minutes for the death by 1,000 cuts bingo. 35
I'll need to
minutes.
get a bell or something.
Need a bell. I said last week that given the season that we've had, we'll likely end up losing 1-0 to a daft goal. But I thought if we turned up and we put a performance in and we got the breaks, if we get the breaks, I thought we could win the game last week. Did we get the breaks? I don't think we did. I'm not disputing the best team won the league, by the way. Not disputing that at all. But a one-off cup tie, you need some breaks. And the 2 goals we lost, the first goal, the guy shoots, it hits off higher, and it spins into the air. It could have went anywhere. Where did it go? Straight to their player, 8 yards out. Who was he? Their holding midfield player. What does he do? Scores with an overhead kick. What are the chances of that happening? Unbelievable. The second goal, another own goal that we like to do at Ibrox this year. So we gave them 2 goals. So, and what did we do? I mean, their goalkeeper was the man of the match.
Mm-hmm.
With 5 or 6 attempts to go, really, really good attempts to go, not just, half chances. We miss a penalty. We've got more possession. We've got more shots and goal. We've got more corner kicks. So you analyse all that stuff and you say, you know what? I know goals change games and you make your own luck and all that. And even the manager said that they rode the luck at times. You need a wee bit of luck. And I thought we were unlucky. And that's with virtually half of the outfield players not turning up. Kenny was awful. Laxalt was awful. Christie never turned up. Elianusi and Edward was a total disgrace. So half the team didn't turn up. And we should have won the game, but for a wee bit of luck. And as I said, I'm not disputing that they've been the best team in the league by a mile this year. But in a one-off game, a wee bit of luck. And that's what was missing last week. Or we'd have been through. And then we'd have been looking at the season a wee bit differently. But I just thought we didn't get the breaks last week.
Just before I come to Tony on his thoughts, now that he's had a chance to reflect for a wee bit of time, Jim, what did you think, talking about Edward there and his attitude and things like that? We picked apart that point where we were 2-0 down and he should have, buried the ball when it broke to him, and he decided to try and flick it in with the side of his foot. What did you make of that whole scenario? Did it register with you as anything, particularly negative, or were we kind of blowing that out of proportion, do you think?
Well, I think I was having to think about this week with somebody, I was chatting to somebody about this, and I think Eddie checked out at Tannadice back at the start of the season. He was obviously one of the ones that wanted to go. And again, I think as fans, we tend to be quite simplistic about things. But if you're Edward and you're on, say he's on 20 grand a week or something like that, he could have moved to another club and earned, 40, 50, 60 grand a week? Easily. Mm-hmm. So every week you're losing 40 grand. Every week you're losing 40 grand. Mentally, where are you if you're losing 40 grand a week? Right. We go to Tannadice and he gets kicked up and down the park, and Dallas turned a blind eye for the whole game. And if I'm Edward and I'm thinking, I'm in this league, I'm getting kicked up and down the park, players aren't getting booked, I'm losing 40 grand a week, I think his main objective this season was not to get injured. And he turns up in some of the big games. AC Milan, away when they scored the cup final, Panenka, but I don't think he's been interested at all. And I think that was easily the worst performance he's ever had. And I think it's a shame that he's going to leave, not the kind of with the bet. I mean, obviously you acknowledge what he's done for his, particularly the treble game against Hearts, and he scored a lot of goals. But for me, he's leaving with a sour taste. I understand his from a fan's point of view, it's dead frustrating. But if I was him, I'd possibly think I would do the same thing. And obviously, he's the all-time highest scorer for the world champions under 21s. So his next move is going to be big. He's going to hopefully play for the world champions at some point in time. He's getting kicked up and down Tannadice. And also what happened from that game, he was injured for the Ferencváros game. And that was significant because we've lost our talisman. And there was so much fallout from the Ferencváros game. And you can trace that back to the Tannadice. And Dallas not doing his job. And Eddie thinking, well, you know what? I've had enough of this. I've got a whole season to go. I'll turn up in certain games. But you can see last week, not even 50 tackles. tackles that were 60-40, 70-30 in his favour. Didn't get near it. Wasn't interested. And then he's played the other night, bizarrely again, but that's for speaking about later on. But hey-ho, we move on.
Yeah, Tony, I think probably my takeaway from the game, as I reflect on it a bit more as the week's gone on, is that Edouard was one of the biggest examples of it, but there's a lot of those players just looked as if they'd down tools, and that was the major thing that I took away from it. If you haven't already registered that they've down tools before now, but that game in particular, there just looked like there was no fight left whatsoever.
Well, I'm not saying Jim's wrong, entitled to his opinion, but I probably, when I was harsh, I called it gutless and spineless, and I still stand by it. How they could not score against Rangers when Rangers gave them the ball the whole second half is beyond me. Even at 1-0, when it went to 1-0, I knew Celtic weren't coming back into it. The game was finished for me after that. It just didn't look at any time as if they could reach the Rangers' defence and, well, sort of believed that they could do it and go and win that game. Yet they created and had a lot of chances. But I thought a lot of players have down tools. Edward being the classic example. You know, and I've seen things all week saying Edward leaving the summer. What's your thoughts? People saying a waster, this or that. You know, I mean, I can't agree with that, but I think he's had this season, or he's spat the dummy for whatever reason, because he maybe promised a move which didn't materialise. He's got to play to earn the big move, but he is a talented player. You know, the world record holder for under 21s in terms of goals. You know, so we wanted him to put in a shift this season. You know, and he hasn't, and you feel so let down by Eddie for that, but he's not alone. He's not alone on that. And that was a team of guys who just, you know, I don't know, they went out there, and I don't think they had any real genuine belief that they could win at Ibrox, and it came to pass, and we passed up the chance to score from a penalty as well with a lack of... Why did Lee Griffiths not overrule Eddie on it? Because Eddie's attitude's been kind of like that for a long part of this season. Lee Griffiths is a striker of a football at the club. He could have rattled that into the net and given you something. And I would put my house on Lee Griffiths scoring for 12 yards against Alan McGregor. You know, so why did he not just pull rank and say, no, I'm hitting it because your head's no in it, you know? And all he wants to do is put his laces through the ball and score goals. Did it. Audrey, when he came on, scored an equaliser, which is the very reason why you would keep him for that alone. But, you know, there's a lot of players there. It's just been a general malaise this season in players that has affected the team in the way they've performed. And if their head's out the door, then they should go out the door. Eddie being the biggest culprit.
Jim, I have a bit more of an... It's along the lines of what Tony's reaction is there, but perhaps a bit more extreme in that once a player does down tools and once they look as if they don't want to try anymore, I find it very difficult to justify keeping a hold of them and wanting them to stay at the club. Jim Hannaway in the comments on YouTube has said, I would like Edouard to stay to be managed under a greater manager, but he's leaving on a low. I think Eddie's a case apart because I think he's going no matter what. But we were having a discussion before we came on air and you were saying about, you know, Lee Griffiths staying. We saw how he came on and scored that goal against Aberdeen during the week and that some people still feel there's something to offer for him. I personally think his time's done, but you said that, you know, you don't agree with that. There's still something you think he can offer for us.
That's because you're wrong, Laura. You're wrong. Just to take up the comment about Eddie. If Eddie's on 20 grand a week, and if Eddie can move and be on 60 grand a week, doesn't matter who the coach is. What's to do with that? Right. So, as far as Lee's concerned, I'm a super Lee fan. I'm on the Lee Griffiths fan club. Right. I don't buy into all this kind of stuff about he's let the club down and all this kind of stuff because we don't know the whole story behind that. But I look at Lee Griffiths before the previous manager came under Ronnie Dyler, scoring goals for fun. Rodgers comes along in another major game. It was going to be the first Glasgow derby since they come back up the league, and Joey Barton's going to rule the roost and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And Lee Griffiths failed a fitness test that day, and we were all thinking, well, that's no so good, we're missing Lee. What happens? Musa Dembele comes in, scores a hat-trick, and the rest is history. So Lee had to play second fiddle to Musa for 2 years because Rogers only played one up front. He didn't split the dummy out. If he was called upon, he came and did a job. And then when Musa then goes, Odson Edwards, the new kid in the block, and he's playing second fiddle to him. Never spat the dummy out. Did his best. And obviously he's got some issues off the park. But anytime he's on the park, for me, he's the best goal scorer in Scotland, bar none. So I'd always have him in the team. I think we won the league last year because Lee Griffiths came into the team at the new year because we were starting to falter, starting to stutter. He comes in the scheme, ups Eddie's game, playing alongside him, scores goals for fun. And that's why we won the league last year. And also this year, the only highlight we've had this year is winning the Scottish Cup, although it was last year's Scottish Cup. Who do we call? Who do we call? Who do we need? Lee Griffiths comes on in the cup final, scores the goal. He's the guy that takes the first penalty. For Scotland, they brought him on with 5 minutes to go of extra time, trying to qualify for the Euros, and he's the first guy to take a penalty. If we lose Lee Griffiths, that's another cut for me.
He's the most natural finisher in Scotland. You know that?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, someone tell me I'm wrong. Then, you know, so
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're right.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
Who won?
What do I know? I think Laxalt's a good defender. No, I totally agree with Jim's point of view of, like, I think there's far too much comment gets made about his state of mind and his attitude and all that kind of thing. None of us really know about that, really. That's all guesswork. It's all things we've read and things that have been said, you know, hearsay and all that kind of thing. I do personally think that he's not as effective a goal scorer as he once was, and I do think we can do better than him. We've obviously struggled trying to replace him with people like Ajeti and Klamala and that kind of thing, but Tony, surely there must be somebody out there who's as good or the potential to be better in the coming years. That Lee Griffiths has to be on the decline now, does he not?
I don't know. It's the one thing that Lee Griffiths would love his goals. You know, and we've talked all season about goals changing games, and we've not scored enough of them. You know, we've tried Ajeti, we've tried Klamala, and Eddie's just, down tools from very early on. So, you know, and as you see, you can question his attitude, you can question whatever, but, you know, if you play Lee Griffiths, he'll score you goals. So, because it's all he wants to do, it's all that's in his head. He doesn't have to do much other than score, and he's very good at that. So, again, go back to what Jim said, and yourself, we don't know the story there, and he has possibly let his teammates down at times with his attitude or whatever, but that's hearsay and speculation. But you put Lee Griffiths up front for Celtic, he'll score goals. Any
Tony,
any game.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say that this season, he uses a sub. He's came on, and people say that he's not fit. He's not match fit. He's not getting matches. And I think, as they say, you maybe need 5 or 6 games on the trot to get match fit. He's never had that, but he still comes on and he still scores goals. And as I said, we can't afford to lose Lee Griffiths because even if you're going to buy somebody else, there's no guarantee. You could bring in a Ajeti or Klamala or Bayo. Right? We've got Griffiths. He knows, as Tony says, he knows where the net is. And I'm hoping he comes back and plays every game, but the last 3 games anyway, and gives himself a fighting chance to get into the Euros because Scotland need him as well. And hopefully he can then start to kick on from there. But yeah, definitely keep him.
See if Celtic are going to play a 4-4-2, I'd always have Griffiths as one of those strikers. I'd pair Griffiths with another. Honestly, all day long.
Well, somebody did mention that he's certainly more effective as one of 2 up front, and I do agree with that. But yeah, and Paul is in the background putting up a lot of comments there. It's definitely a divisive topic. I think I'm probably in the minority. I think more people agree with you guys that they would rather keep him than not. But you know, we'll see.
Well, can I just finish with one last comment?
Yeah, on you go.
One last comment. You put up a comment there that Lee has let us down this year. Has he? Has he let us down this year? How do we know that?
I don't personally believe. I mean, I think he's done, but I don't think he's let us down any more than any other player this season.
I think when Lee Griffiths has been called upon, he's scored goals. If you look at his minutes to goals, I think it was pretty impressive. And he's not had the run in the team, so he's not match fit. And he played against Falkirk the other week, and he snatched at a few chances. And people say, he's not fit, he's let us down. He's not match fit. You get Lee Griffiths match fit, he'll score you 20, 30 goals a season. And as I just explained, I just saw that comment about doing nothing for the past 3 or 4 years. He was playing second fiddle to 2 potentially world-class players. Didn't he spit the dummy out? You know? Didn't he throw the toys out the pram? Or any other daft metaphor I can think of. Right, so I'm you know, as I said at the start, I'm on the Lee Griffiths fan club.
When he played in a 2 with both of those world-class players, they were very effective, and Celtic scored a lot of goals.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Aye.
So, but I mean, the stats will back that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I do. You know, if there's one thing you can say about him, regardless of any reservations that anybody might have about him, his scoring record does speak for itself. What I think it does speak to in a wider sense is, and an attitude that I see a lot, is, you know, a desire to keep a hold of players perhaps past the point of them being effective. Like, I wouldn't celebrate losing a player in any situation, but, you know, I was pleased to see Scott Brown get his move on, not because I don't think he's been a good player for us, not because I don't think he has done us a service, but because I think the time has come, and I think that's the case for a lot of other players. Tony, I'll come to you first. Are there any players that, if you think Griffiths is got something still to offer, are there any players that you would absolutely move on? I think we can take the loan players out of it. Is there any players that we have currently on contract that you would say their time's up?
Well, you know my thoughts on Aya. I'd move him on, and it's highly unpopular, but I've rationalised that and I've told you why. Or else, if you're going to keep Aya, he is nowhere near your defence. Has to go and try his luck in the midfield and be a commanding kind of midfielder, because he's big enough and he should be a dominating person in your team. He doesn't dominate in defence for me. Probably too many mistakes. His positional sense is wide of the mark, and when he runs forward with a ball for 70 yards, he ends up running out of ideas and then he's hopelessly out of position. Explained all that. So Aya can go, or if he stays, he doesn't play in the defence. Right? Welsh you keep. Right? Sorrow, everybody's asking to see more of Sorrow because he's got something about his game. Turnbull's a certainty to stay. You agree that he's probably the future of the club. You're building teams around guys like Turnbull. Taylor should stay. We'll not go into the... But there's a player there in Taylor, and maybe a new manager can get the best out of Taylor the way Steve Clark get a tune out of Taylor, which he ended his move to Celtic. So, right, Welsh got potential, but I said let's just let the boy breathe and let him play and chalk up a number of games for Celtic and see where he goes. But labelling him this and that and putting too much pressure on him. He's young, he's raw, but there's something there. So yeah, he can stay. Edward's out the door, isn't he? Christie probably out the door. Cal Mack's the one that people are saying, you know, I just don't see leadership qualities in Callum McGregor, so I wouldn't make him the captain. And I still think that maybe Cal Mack is just jaded, you know, he's bumped out a wee bit.
Paul, just before I go on to Jim, Paul, can you pull that comment back up from Taxi DMAC before we move on? Don't know if we've still got it there. He said something along the lines of that we're deluded because we cover the women's game and don't go to games. Not as deluded as sitting watching a Rangers podcast and commenting on it, but we'll leave it there. Jim, I'll come to you. What are your thoughts? Are there any of the players that are currently contracted to us on a permanent basis that you think their time's up if Griffiths is one that you would like to hold on to?
Define deluded is your first question. No, I would keep everyone because we're going to lose all the loan players, and Eddie's going to go, and Aya might go, and McGregor might go, and Christie might go. That doesn't leave too many that are left, and I think any new manager coming in, it's a complete clean slate. And who's to know, somebody like Cham might turn out to be a better player under a new manager. So I think we have to we don't have enough players. It's incredible we're in the situation that we're in just now. So I don't think many people will actually go. And I think everyone will get a new start under the new manager, who hopefully will be in sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
Who's that going to be, Jim?
I actually mentioned Josie last week, and I don't think there's any chance of that happening. Eddie Howe. We're on the Eddie Howe bus, yeah.
I was about to say, if there is a bus for Mourinho, then ding ding ding, driver, I want off. Just drop me here. I'm no for that at all. We got into depth about that last week, but we heard David Lowe talking about it before we came on, Tony, just while that topic comes up. I'm starting to get uneasy about the fact there is no announcement. I was quite all right about it before. I thought we were just biding our time and getting things sorted, but as we've talked about earlier in the week, the managerial merry-go-round is starting to kick into gear, and you risk losing out on your desired candidate, do you not, if you don't act fast?
That depends, doesn't it, on what you believe and what you're reading. I mean, I think it's no secret that Celtic have approached Eddie Howe. Now, is that what number one, number two, number three target?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if Celtic have gone in all in on Eddie Howe and he doesn't come, then yeah, he's not allowed to bring his whole busload of staff. Then Celtic have seen
because it's a plethora. Got that in.
Yeah, plethora. Yes,
a plethora of staff. Yes.
Plethora.
Use the Three Amigos analogy. Yeah, but you know, so if they have gone all, I mean, I just think Celtic going to take this long if Eddie Howe hadn't guaranteed that he was coming. You know, yeah, it leaves you uneasy, but I still think that Eddie Howe will be the new manager of Celtic. I have to be honest.
Yeah.
Just things been ironed out, but again, how long it's taken to actually inform the fans of that news is a bit worrying, makes you uneasy, but I think it's came too far for it not to happen now.
Mm-hmm. Jim, I heard, I can't remember if it was in the David Lowe interview or catching up on one of the other podcasts, but there was talk of there having been, non-disclosure agreements and things like that, and that's the reason we're not hearing very much from any of the candidates that have been approached. You would like to think that even if there's no announcement having been made, that the person is in place, would you not?
You'd like to hope so. I mean, I said back in January they were in limbo, and we were scunnered back then, and nothing's changed. And actually things have got worse, because what you've now got is you've got an interim manager in John Kennedy who's trying to win games, because that's important for him. He's not giving other players a chance to play. I mean, why was playing Edward the other night? Because most of the fans would say, well, let's see some of the guys who are going to be here next year. But that's not John Kennedy's main objective. His main objective is win games of football that will make him look good. So it's doing us even more damage. The longer we wait, the more damage it causes. But yeah, I'd like to think we've already got the guy. But also the fact it is a hugely complex thing. And if you are aiming high, and Eddie Howe is pretty high, it becomes even more complex. I mean, we could have went and got somebody like Jack Ross 5 months ago if we wanted to do that. I'm sure that had to please Kevin. Only kidding. But if you're going after a top manager...
Jack Ross is manager and
Howe,
Greg Taylor is captain.
The dream team. But if you're going after one of the top managers, then it's going to be complex, and there's going to be competition from other teams for his signature as well. So everything has to be right for him. And we've talked in the past about Eddie Howe having to relocate his whole family for the south of England. There's all these factors. It becomes very, very complicated. But the blokes have been doing this last October, November, and got this sorted out way before now. And I do share your concern that maybe other factors are going to come into play, and we're going to lose out on the guy we want.
Yeah. Tony, I can't even think of somebody who comes into the frame that I would think, if Eddie Howe doesn't go through, of the other names that have been mentioned, one that I would particularly want. Maybe Lucien Favre, but that's about it.
Well, Favre's the kind of wild card top kind of entry, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
You know, people seem to like the cut of his jib if it's not him, but you're always running the risk now of if it's not Eddie Howe, then the next manager or the person that does come in knows that they're not the first choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's been such a song and dance made about Eddie Howe, allegedly, unless Celtic have been cute as anything, and I've spoke to or I've barred down the line with one or two candidates, say two, and they're just kind of weighing up their own options.
Mm-hmm.
But that would smack of forward planning and, a real kind of forward thinking, which Jim's like, So I'm like you as well. I'm sceptical that that's happened, So Favre's probably the only one that you would maybe say, and you just know that Keane is going to polarise everybody again.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know that Dermot Desmond has always been keen on Keane, so it's still lurking there somewhere in the shadows, isn't it?
I think so. I think that's where we're going to have to end it for today. Speculation remains the name of the game, and until we have something more concrete to go on, that's what we'll have to go with. So I say thanks again to everybody for watching on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Thanks to Jim and to Tony for joining me today. We'll see you next week when who knows what will have happened, but thanks again, and see you over the weekend for the coverage of the women.